It's the breakdown. Release that. Release that. Release that. It's the breakdown.
Hey, how's it going? Man, it's been a long time. I haven't been on the stream in what feels like forever. And I am back for a special relaunch of the channel with a new series called Build in Public. And I am your lovely host, Key Clark. How's it going? If you haven't guessed, this is a brand new series, and today we're going to be rebuilding rather, an app that we already worked on in a previous stream. So if you go to the YouTube channel, you'll see that I worked on this comic panel app. Basically, the idea is that this app will help a person create the comic panels that they can use in order to draw their comics. And I originally made this application a long time ago in a previous set of streams, and I decided that I wanted to rebuild it better and stronger. And also with the goal of making it available in public for you out there to use this application as well. So let's go ahead and jump into it. And we'll start first by looking at the previous version of the application and talking about where we left off and where we'll pick up. So here we go. Okay, so this is the comic panel application. And I built this, like I said, months ago. And it was kind of like I don't know. I just got like a random inspiration to make this application, and I did it in a really, really short time. I used a ton of AI, not gonna lie, and I made it real quick and messy, basically. And as a little bit of a background, I actually have a master's degree in comic arts or illustration with the focus in comic arts from the Academy of Art University. I graduated in 2017 for my MFA. And for many years, I made comics the old fashioned way. Even in the presence of digital tools, I found that usually my best work was done by hand. And so, that being said, I wanted to create a tool that would help me to make comic books in real life, but much faster. And for me, the slow part of making a comic was always setting up the actual layouts of the page in a consistent way, um, and organizing the story into those panels, as well as setting up the perspective grids for each of the panels, or for the page as a whole, possibly. And so I wanted to make a tool that could help me with all of those parts, even up to possibly even doing some sketching. And with the idea that this could be printed out in non-photo blue or even exported to your favorite digital drawing application. And then you can take that and you can do your magic, whether traditionally or digitally. And there are a couple comic book apps out there. So my goal here as well is to really focus on my experience that I've had as a traditional comic artist. And even if I make something that deviates from what the norm is with those types of apps, I think the idea is just to be fun and innovative here. And yeah, so let's take a quick tour. So this application here, from a technical perspective, was created using Node. For the front end, I used, excuse me, for the front end, I used JavaScript and React. Um, and I used not Vite, Zustan, I believe, for the state management of the front end. Um, and I am using Vite, of course, for building the application as well, and some Tailwind for styling. And so all of this here is just basically a React application. And I didn't do a whole lot of custom styling here, to be honest. I was really just focused on the features and the experience rather than the design. And as I move forward into rebuilding this, I will, of course, try to hone in on a little bit better of a design. I want this to be a desktop application instead of a web-based application, even though it will be built partially using web technologies. But I don't want it to look like a website. I want it to feel like an application that runs on the desktop, as native as possible. So for the back end of this, I also have a Node server. And the server code here is pretty basic. The database that I originally used was PostgreSQL. I'll be migrating to SQL. I'll talk about the details of the migration or the rebuild here in just a second. But this is all PostgreSQL. Essentially, what's happening for this application is I have a database where I am storing each of the page layouts. And these page layouts essentially are just collections of coordinates for where the actual panels are, as well as a height and a width for them. And then the panels for each page are, of course, numbered. And then I added the ability for pages to be stored in collections. And a collection is just a series of these layouts, essentially. So what that basically allows for us to do is to create these pages. Let me go ahead and start a new collection here. We'll just call this a test collection. And it looks like it didn't work, so that's great. I don't know what's wrong with it. I haven't used this app in a very long time, so I'm gonna skip that part. And oh, looks like it did. I don't know. Oh, I already had one with that name. Looks like I was lacking some error handling for existing collections. Oh, that's interesting. But we'll just go ahead and use this one here since this one already exists. So you'll see here that I have a couple of different layouts for this collection. So this could be like a comic book. This could be an anthology, or this could even just be like a comic strip with multiple sections. But the idea here is that on each of these pages, I can make these panels, and I can do it in a couple ways. I can make a panel by splitting vertically or by splitting horizontally. And then once the panels are created, I can additionally shift them like this as well. So if I want to manually manipulate them. Originally, I also planned default gutters as well, with the idea that let's say that you want to have a different gutter width for the story you're telling. Sometimes the width between two panels can indicate a passage of time or something like that. So I just basically had a feature here so I could consistently control that. The other cool thing is that these panels have they're indexed. So the panel that has a higher number is more on top. It's also assumed that ones that have higher numbers should progress towards the bottom, but that doesn't necessarily have to be true. I wanted to have the ability to overlap because then you could have inset panels that are inset with each other, which is a cool way to tell stories. So anyways, without nerding too much about the panelage here, we can save these, but I'm not going to save that. And a feature that that's also here too is like you can see behind all of this, there's this pink line here, this pink box, and there's one you can barely see. It's a light blue, light cyan line. These are the safe area and the trim area, which you generally need to know when you're doing a comic because you want to draw the main details inside of the safe area, and the trim is where you assume there's going to be a cutoff. So anything that's between the safe area and the trim area could be lost detail. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for that. Once again, these comic pages are saved as data, and then they're rendered on the DOM. And all the data is just a layout, a set of coordinates for each of the panels, and then they're numbered, which determines their level on the Z index. And a couple last things that I did here is I had the ability to generate a script as well. So essentially, you can add your Anthropic API key, although I'm going to change this to Gemini because that's what I'm using right now. But you can actually provide creative direction, and then if you use the API key, then it will generate a script for that page. And let's see if it'll work. Like I said, I haven't used this in forever, but I have my API key in the environment, so I don't need to put it here. And I didn't give it any parameters, so it's just going to come up with a random story probably. It takes a few moments because it has to generate all those tokens and stuff and send it back. And it only renders after the stream is complete, of course. But then here in a second, once it's done, you'll see that we can preview the story as a whole, but we can also view the story distributed between the panels, which is the way that scripts are oftentimes written for comics. They usually indicate where the story falls within the actual panels. Now, these scripts don't currently save, but in my rebuilds, of course, they will. So we can view the script here. This script is about a young woman who explores abandoned house, uncovering haunting memories and a surprising revelation about her own connection to the place. Okay, cool. So it gives us all the information about the scene here. This is very hard to read. The user experience here is not great, but you can see here all the panels basically have full description, and then the comic as a whole has details. And this can be really helpful if you want to just practice drawing comics, and maybe you're not too interested in the writing part, but you just want something to practice with, and you want to just use AI to generate some quick scripts that you can practice your drawing skills on. It's kind of the idea. And then with these purple boxes, we can see all the details that go for each of these individual panels. Okay. Whew, I'm out of breath. Okay, so that's the AI feature. This is not going to be the first thing that I make, but I definitely want to explore this, as well as the ability to generate images within the panels, create them generatively within the panels. But those are not the main goal. The main goal right now is just to rebuild the basic app. And then the last part here is the ability to export. So I can export this entire, I don't have the ability to export collections. I never got that far with the original builds, but I did have the ability to export the entirety of a page as a PNG graphic. And we can preview it here, of course. That one's pretty plain. Let's get one that's more interesting. So we can open up this one, and then we can, so the print version will look like this. Now, since this page has the panels going beyond the safe area, of course, they don't necessarily show. Let me just tweak this here. Make this a little bit more, let's do like an overlapping panel here, like that. That's very creative. And it can go off the page a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and preview this. So now you can see here, and the idea is that when I rebuild this, I also want to do more to indicate the Z index, maybe by having like more clear overlappage. But that's I'll figure that out later on. Okay, so we can export, and we can do that as PNG or as PDF. There's also an AI preview as well, so you can see the panels being numbered. This graphic gets rendered and sent to Anthropic along with the script. So it's kind of, it essentially is going to be informed by what it sees. Now, what's going to be interesting is that when I get the perspective grid on here, and then the ability to do some preliminary sketches in here and send that over too, then it's going to be even more interesting to see how AI can use this pre-rendered thumbnail version of the comic, essentially. And then you go back as the artist and you do a more refined version. So yeah, this is just really meant, once again, really meant to be an app that helps with that inception stage, setting up layouts, early exploration, ideation, quick sketches, thumbnails, that kind of thing for comic artists. And that was always the part that I found the most interesting and enjoyable as an artist. And that's the stuff that I enjoy doing, to this day. I love doing like a one-day comic. I love doing a weekend comic. I love doing like a quick comic challenge. And this app is going to be amazing for that. Okay, so that's the tour. I was inspired by, the kind of apps that everyone uses, but I just feel like there's space for some innovation. And that's why I worked on this. Okay, so let's take a look at the code, and then we're going to talk about how we made the transition to, to getting ready for the whole rebuild. So once again, this is the Comic Panel app. We are going to be initializing this new spin-off project using an entirely different framework. and with the goal of converting this from being a React web app to a Tauri desktop application that uses SolidJS. That's the goal. Okay, so here's the code, and this is what's currently running. And I don't think that there's much here to see. Let's just take a look around and make sure we're not missing any details. Oh, one last thing. This isn't going to make it in the new version of the app, but I actually did create a process that allowed me to basically take. So I have these roadmap files, basically. A roadmap is like a clear set of tasks, essentially, kind of like a set of tasks for a sprint, kind of. And I did have the ability to directly convert a document into project items for GitHub, which was kind of helping me with the initial build. That got a little messy, so I will not be bringing that over in my new process. I think I actually have a better process now than this, so that's not necessary. But there was a whole syncing script and all that stuff in here. It was actually pretty cool. I might find another reason to use that in the future. Oh, another thing that I did with this is I actually kept all the posts that I ever made on social media about this project. I actually kept them in here. So what I could do actually is I can take this and I can migrate these files to the next project directory, which means that I will have a continuing history of the content that I've made about this app in writing, which will help me write future content. And I'll be able to use AI to kind of help that process. And we'll migrate this stuff over a little bit later. And then, yeah, so I just have to remember that. Okay. Anything else here? I did my own license. I was really interested in like learning about what makes a license, and I figured the best way to do it was to make my own. I've decided that for this new project, I'm going to use a more conventional license. I don't want to get myself in trouble. I'm just going to say it like that. I don't want to get myself in trouble. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and spin this down, and then we're going to switch over to the new app. So I already have a repo for this set up, and it's called Primatif Comics App Tauri. If you are interested in this project and you want to see this project develop live, living, and in color, then I welcome you to come over to the official Primatif YouTube channel. I'm sorry. I welcome you to come over to the official Primatif GitHub page. That's what I meant. And if you go to that page, then you'll be able to see this project as well as all the other projects that I will be and have been working on in this channel as my main squeezes. So here's just a quick look. You can see here, this is the official page. Got my lovely dog. This business card is an interesting side project of its own. We'll talk about that later on. But you can see down here, Primatif Comics App Tauri. Okay, so this is where we're at. We're going to be working on this for several episodes. So stay tuned, grab a snack, get some water, a coffee, and we're going to take a quick break here just for like 5 minutes. And then when we get back, we're going to jump head first into this application and get it popping. Okay? So don't go too far, but if you go anywhere, make sure you come on back to the pack. I'll be right here. Bow. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back, y'all. Hey, what's up? It's your lovely host, Key, and we're going to be jumping back into the comic app. But first, I want to do a quick aside. So, as I mentioned, I am very comfortable with using AI. I've been a developer, first of all, for a very long time. I professionally started my career in 2018, but I built my first websites more than 20 years ago. And one thing I've realized is that it's always good to use the best tool possible that will give you the best quality project possible for whatever your circumstances are. So, I'm going to give you just a very quick blurb about my philosophy with AI. You can take it with a grain of salt. You do not need to agree with my perspective, but I just want to share my perspective about how to use AI responsibly. And I hope that this could be like a good conversational piece. And I would love to hear some feedback if you feel this way or feel differently. So, when I think about AI specific to software engineering, the biggest thing is that AI can help with things that you would have probably needed to Google or search anyways, right? And as a developer, we're always Googling, searching. In the past, we would use, Stack Overflow or something like that. Or we would go to primary documentation and we would read that to try to, understand how to do something, especially when we're working with a new framework or a new tool or something like that. In an age where we have access to AI, it's not as important for us to go all over the place and look at all these different websites because AI can more or less give us a composite form of information, or it could even go and pull those sources on our behalf and present them to us in a derivative way, so to speak. So essentially, that is really what I look, for AI to do at its best. Connect me with information that I was probably already going to look up in the first place, and then also to follow the directions from those sources. Sorry, I had some chips while I was on my break, so I'm like dry throated. I'll be okay. So basically, I just use AI to kind of help me with things that I was probably already going to Google anyways, essentially. And I don't think that it's really any more than that, but that's like a big deal. Okay. Um, so, anyways, the big thing here that I do want to say, however, is that when you use AI, you can build incredibly fast. You can go from 0 to 60. If you really wanted to, you could probably crunch out a poorly built but working application in just a matter of a day or a week, depending on what you're making, right? An AI can get you there really fast, but very sloppily. So one of the most important things that you provide in this whole process of agentic development, or AI assisted engineering, is you provide oversight and you provide feedback and you provide architectural direction for where to go. Also, your one of your main responsibilities is to make sure that AI is doing this code in a way that is maintainable. Um, because AI can build very fast, as we've already established, but it has a tendency to create code in a way that is optimized for tokenage, for token usage and availability, rather than building in a way that is optimized for, an actual application that needs to stand some type of test of time. And what that oftentimes means is really big, large, monolithic files. I'm not going to get into an example of that right now, but just keep that in mind. Your job is to make sure that AI is following a design that makes sense, and with the idea of architecture that is also sensical. And AI has a really hard time of seeing beyond a certain scope, especially when you start to deal with things like deployment, infrastructure, um, microservices, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to use Gemini. If you want to use Gemini, go to their official GitHub page. They have a page for the command line interface. Super easy to install. It's just an NPM script, so you will need to have Node. Although there's some other ways to install it on their website. You can even do Homebrew. I would just recommend doing Homebrew or NPM. And then once you get that installed, I would recommend setting up your Gemini API key. This isn't required. You can actually just use your Google account, and if you have a subscription to one of their AI packages, then you can just use that pool of token resources. However, if you want to exceed what is allotted based on your subscription and be able to pay basically through the Google platform billing, and payments, then you can either have a Gemini API key that you can generate from GCP, or you can have a Vertex AI API key as well. Okay. I think it uses a Gemini, but it just takes a variable for Vertex. Okay. So once again, I just use this here, but let me just tell you that Google is super generous. Google is super generous with how much they give you. Google is extremely generous with how much they give you. I hardly need to use my Gemini API. Now, when you do, which eventually you might, I will have some advice for you. The preview, the quick and dirty version is that you're going to understand where the gotcha is with using Gemini CLI, especially when it comes to managing context. You're responsible for optimizing token usage because it can get out of control real fast. But along the way, I'm going to show you how to avoid that. Okay. So if you're using Gemini CLI, this is going to be great because you can essentially use the same process that I'm going to use. And let's go ahead and move forward and talk about the setup for this repo, and you'll understand the role that Gemini CLI plays in my project. Aside from just helping me write code, I use it for a lot more. Okay, so here is our repository. Now, this is not actually set up with any code. It's just a simple README. I have some, just some basic files here. There's an environment variable file. We don't need this yet, but we have the git ignore, and we also have just a quick license. I'm using the Polyform strict license. Don't be trying to change my app and steal it, but you can download and use it if you want to. That's what that means, basically, but less sassily, of course. To get my project started, since I am working on rebuilding from something that already exists, what I actually did was in my original application, I used Gemini to inspect this application and basically convert this entire application into a general description of features, with the idea that if I brought over this general description of features and a general idea of what this app does and how it's constructed, that I could reapproach it in specific using different technology, which is exactly what I'm doing. So I had a whole session yesterday where I was able to create a project scope document. Now, if you've been a software engineer, then you may already know this, but a project scope document is one of the essential firsts that you must create if you're trying to make a project that follows the traditional standard process of formal software engineering. Okay, so what this scope document basically has within it is it has the vision for the application. Now, it doesn't have the solution for how it's built. It doesn't contain any code or anything like that. No recommendations for specific implementations, but it does list out the technologies that I think will be useful for this project with some reasoning. It does list out why these technologies are needed. In the event that these specific ones don't work for my use case, at least I'll have the reasoning, which can help me find better options. I have a set of standards. I don't want to just make an application, at any expense. I want to make one that works, and I want to make one that works for my users' best experience. So I have some standards here which are meant to maintain the quality of the code. And I want these to all be taken into account as we move forward from the beginning. Things like accessibility, performance, and security, these are all first-class citizens in good, well-designed software. Okay. And considering them first, especially when you're working with AI, is incredibly important because, as you're going to find, as you're going to see, this code is going to be built really fast. And if we don't keep it under control, it's going to get real messy, like real bad. Okay. I got a little intense there. Sorry. Okay. So some future architecture considerations. This isn't really important, but one thing I will say is when you're working on a scope document that you're trying to use as an AI consumable, it is really important to have some type of idea of what scaling or the progress of your application might look like. Now, you don't want to be too specific, but if you have a strong idea of like what you're wanting this app to be built like, or something is important to you, you should mention it in an abbreviated way, but you don't need to detail it. And the value of mentioning things for future considerations is that I want to make sure that the way I'm building now doesn't back me into a corner. Have you been working on something and then you go to add a new feature? Then the next thing you know is like, in order to add that new feature, then you're going to have to like go back and make some dramatic changes to something you've already spent a ton of time on, right? But if we know what we're building towards, at least in some sense, we always try to think a little bit ahead. If you know that, then you can make really, really smart and sophisticated design decisions from the onset and lower the chance that you're creating a lot of extra unnecessary work. And might add, that's why it's important to do a prototype. That's the whole reason why I created this initial version of the application, was because I wanted to make sure that when I built the real thing, that I don't have to worry so much because I've already made a lot of mistakes, here. Okay. So save the mistakes for the big mistakes for your prototype. Okay, so I also have some information about the application and the user experience. Now, since I am working from a pre-existing application and rebuilding it, I can additionally go and steal code snippets from that application and put them into GEMINI here and basically have it rebuild something similar. I can do that directly. I can also give it a link to the original repo where the prototype lives so it can look at that code. I will try to limit that. There are some patterns I don't want to inherit, but that's kind of a thing. So these are all the core features here. Notice that these descriptions aren't too specific. These aren't solutions. These are just things that I want. And then I wanted to make sure that this project has really well organized file system, because AI agents are really bad, once again, at making smart decisions about the long-term structure of the file system. And if you don't watch out, you will have a file that is like 1,000 lines long, and then AI can barely read that file to edit it, and it just becomes a whole mess. And then the larger your application and the more of these big monolithic files you have, it becomes a huge effort and extremely expensive on your tokens to actually go back and refactor that stuff. And when you're the one who's responsible for paying tokens, or you have to manage the tokens because you don't want to burn the earth or destroy Mother Nature, then you should probably have a plan in mind for how you want to build and structure the directories so it doesn't get out of control. Just say it. I think I made a good argument there. Let me know down in the comments. So this is my recommended just basic structure. The big thing I noticed when it came to the front end is that I have to have an idea of like how this application is structured as a whole and make sure that that is reflected in this component system here. Um, and the big thing for me personally, and the way that I like to code, is I like to have modular, isolated components that can be hopefully reused and remixed. You know, that's one of the benefits of using React and using SolidJS is the ability to have a component library. Um, so yeah, I just wanted it to be, you know, organized this way. All this is not like a guarantee. If the app doesn't have this exact structure, that's fine. I might even have in these folders the CSS and the test file for each of these components, as well as if there's any data or constants. You know, keeping things kind of just grouped together is kind of a theme for me, regardless of where in the stack any of this code falls. And so this is, I only really put this in here because I wanted AI to kind of just understand at the onset that I'm not joking. You know, if you don't show AI, then you're leaving it to chance for it to make a good decision, and it might not. Okay, so here's the backend architecture as well. Um, One thing that I am going to probably also do is consider the merits of an MCP server. Um, that's not immediately important. I'm going to just do it this way for now, but I consider the merits of an MCP server when it comes to the ability to use multiple LLMs. I'm not an expert on that stuff, but I know enough to know that that's something I should be thinking about. And these examples here aren't really that important, but it's nice that they're there. These are just interfaces, so types. Now, since I'm going to be using Rust for the back end and TypeScript for the front end, one of the things I kind of lose out on without having a TypeScript node backend is the ability to share types. But that's okay. I'm willing to make that sacrifice because Rust is going to be so lightning fast that I'm going to be able to use it for all sorts of crazy stuff. So it's worth that trade-off for me. And then we have some performance architecture, just preferences and how to build things, because this is meant to be an application that is in every way, shape, or form as much of a desktop performing app as possible. I chose SolidJS because I wanted to have a really fast rendering engine with TypeScript, of course, and SolidJS seemed to be the most performant, fastest because it doesn't have to compare a virtual DOM. So I think I'm going to be able to meet these goals here, but I'm going to have to make some really smart decisions about how to build and how to manage memory, and also how to manage the database so that I don't create really awkward, slow bottlenecks in performance or ability to use the UI. Okay, so plugin architecture. Yeah, I would like to have the ability for plugins to be added. I think that architecture will also make this a lot easier for me to build it if I do it with plugins in mind. And then also it would allow me to open up potentially an ecosystem so other people could develop plugins for it, which would be so dope. Oh my goodness. If I could make an application where other people were able or interested in making plugins for it, yeah, I might cry. I promise you, I will cry. I will cry on the stream. How about that? But I'll also just be crying because I would be so happy. That just seems like a dream. Okay, so anyways, security and privacy. Of course, this app needs to be secure. It is a desktop app, but it does have something to do with managing API keys, and that's a big thing. You know, once a person puts their API key or token or whatever into an application for it to use, that application basically has the ability to charge their credit card. And so you want to make sure that is safe, secure, tested, and stable. So for all you out there who want to use this app and play around with it, for now, while this is like not even like fully done, do it at your own your own discretion. But I do want to make sure that that's like a part of the app that's very safe, because I also don't want my API tokens to be blown up by a misused loop or something crazy like that, or a recursive call or something crazy. Okay, so anyways, we're not gonna read this whole thing here. The whole point, though, is that I have this whole scope document that basically is the overarching plan for how to get this new build of the application to some degree of madeness that reflects the original prototype application. And along the way, I want to try to make smart and economical improvements on the design of the application. But I don't want to veer too far off from this scope document unless it's absolutely necessary. And then by completing the app here, the idea is not just to have an app in my local developer environment. However, I want this to also be an application that is going to be available for other people to use at the beginning. I'm going to treat deployment and platform as a first-class citizen in my application development process. And so when we are initializing this here in a little bit, that's going to be a part of my concern and interest. And I'm going to show you that in just a few moments. Yeah, there's way too much code in this project scope. But that's fine. I mean, these kind of just are like boilerplate examples. These examples here, unfortunately, are not up to par with how I would code. I believe in a decent amount of in-code documentation, especially when we're using AI. But these examples at least lay out some patterns. I'm not too worried about them right now. I'm going to be looking at the code as it's written anyway, so those don't matter as much. Phases. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to be starting with the first phase right now. This is going to be setting up the basic Tauri application. And when I say basic, I mean a white screen or a colored screen or something like that. Nothing, like no actual feature. I literally just want to set up Tauri, display a blank screen or text or something, and then have the server and the database as well. Maybe have some text from the database go through the server and show up on the DOM, and that's the actual app that I'm going to build today. And then to quickly move over to setting up a workflow pipeline on GitHub so that we can take that really basic placeholder application and as quickly as possible get a build with a version that is created off the main branch. So then now we have like an automated process and we can release to the main branch and have a build that has already been tested. So we're going to set up some testing and stuff like that. This might end up being only the setup and the testing and the workflow thing for a couple of streams, but just follow me, because after we put in that work to set up the deployment and the automation stuff early, then it makes our life so much easier. It is way easier if you're working an app by yourself, it's way easier to manage deployment and all that kind of stuff if you do it when the app is simple. Trying to do all that stuff when you have like 50 billion things going on in your application, I mean, you could do it. I'm not going to do it though. I'll let you have that one. I'm just not going to do it. That sounds crazy to me. You know what I mean? Does it sound crazy to anyone else? So yeah, set up your deployment, your pipeline. Like if you know this is going to be the real deal, or if you're just wanting to have an app that you can actually release, set that up early, and do it with the most basic app, with the most basic environment variable configurations, with the most basic infrastructure, literally just the essentials and placeholders. And if you do your pipeline, automation, linting, building, whatever process you're using and all of that, if you do all of that as a full cycle first and then build out your features and then add all your other fancy stuff, you're going to be able to make more sense of it, and you're going to be able to update the deployment stuff as you go instead of having to like you know, I don't know. I can't relate because I just would never, I would try to avoid that at all costs. Okay. Okay. So, I already have Gemini on my computer. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into this, and we're going to be doing this for maybe like 30, 40 minutes, and then we're going to take a break. If you're just joining us, you're watching Primitive, and we are working on the Comic Panel application. This is an app that I worked on several months ago. It's an app for comic artists, and it's to help them do what they do faster, especially for people who are traditional comic artists. And we're reinitializing this as a part of the Build in Public effort to bring coding to the world so you can watch and follow along and maybe even ask questions. My name is Key. I am your lovely host. And let's go ahead and jump into working. So I'm using the Windsurf. This is a Windsurf text editor or IDE. I guess I don't know if it's an IDE. I don't know. I mean, the boundary around that's weird now. I'm just going to say this is my code editor. There you go. And I use Windsurf because Windsurf is my baby. Windsurf is bae, I like Windsurf. Windsurf, to me, has one of the most generous, cost to token ratios, I would say. It has one that has really worked for me. A lot of people use Cursor or some of the other options. This is just what I like. Theirs is called Cascade, and basically Cascade has the ability to have its own memory of the workspace. Also, it has the ability to navigate the file system in order to make changes across it when it's changing code. Its model is optimized for AI coding, although it can do other things if you ask it questions. It also has the ability to look on the internet. It is multimodal. So you can also, down here, this little tiny button, you can also upload images. Sometimes I take screenshots of the actual app. If it's getting something weird or wrong with the styling, I'll even just give it an image. You can also talk to it. And you can also pick the different models you want to use. I do not use Cascade as my main model. I use it, or my main chat interface. I use it to solve really, really difficult problems. I think Cascade and the Windsurf code editor is one of the best tools when you're trying to solve a really complex problem that requires something more than what you might be able to get from Gemini. Gemini is going to get us like 80, 90% of the way, but it's probably going to get stuck on some things. And Claude Sonnet thinking via Cascade is going to save the day. I find that it is not really useful to use the Gemini models in Cascade, even though it is my preferred command line tool, because Gemini is really designed for the Gemini context files, which we haven't talked about yet. But it's really designed for those. And I don't believe that it can leverage them when you're using it in Cascade. So I noticed that Gemini is not as smart in Cascade as it is when you just use the CLI, just because of the inability for it to actively work with literal context that you have put. And I'm going to show you what that means here in a few moments. I'm going to show you the context. Okay, so I'm going to close Cascade for now. We'll come back to it later if we need it for something really difficult. But I'm going to go ahead and start up Gemini. I have a alias for Gemini on my computer. Because there's actually two versions you can have it run. You can have it run the Flash model, the 2.5 Flash model, and that's useful for like most things, especially if you want to save tokens or if you want to save the planet and not burn us all up. You're probably going to do it either way, but you're going to do it less with the Flash model. And that's what I use for most of my work. And the other model, which you can see them, they're down here in this little corner here. The other model is called the Pro model. And the Pro model is more of a thinking model. Both of them do a little bit of thinking, but the Pro model just goes deeper. And it just has a better grasp of context and language. Now, whenever we load up Gemini, however you choose to load it, in whichever version you choose to load, you'll see here that Gemini actually has two things that it has access to immediately when it loads. And these two features here are going to basically extend its ability beyond the boundaries of what the strict LLM has within its training. So the first thing here is we have these Gemini.markdown files. And a Gemini.markdown file can either be one or more files that are in the same directory as your project. And whenever Gemini CLI is opened in the directory of your project, if there are these Gemini files, then they all as a whole are concatenated and then added to any of your prompts so that Gemini has them in context whenever it's thinking about the stuff that you're asking it to do. Now, the reason why that's important is that you can actually use these Gemini markdown files to hold important contextual information about the project. So for example, if you have preferences around architecture, if you have preferences around tooling, if you have any kind of preferences or things that you want AI to remember or consider as you're working with it, I call them standards, then you'll use these Gemini markdown files to hold those things. So for me, I know that I have certain ways that I like to work when it comes to full stack development. So I have some front end specific information here. Let's take a look at this here. Okay, so these are some standards that I have for front end development. I have some preferences on how I want my directory structure to be composed. You can see here similar. I have some, basically, I guess the catch or the takeaway here is that I want to, as much as possible, have my agent code in my project in a consistent way from the beginning. And so, kind of like we do with linting, but more about the style of the coding, you give it examples and you also give it things that it can't or should not do. Linting is still important, but this is more about just your general preferences for how you want your file system and your files to be treated. Another thing you can do with these Gemini files as well is you can describe a workflow. You can just say, do A, then do B, and then do C whenever I tell you to do, whatever the workflow name is. You can do things like that as well. Essentially, just think about these Gemini MD files as being a tool that augments any prompt that you're sending over with your command line interface. And so anything that might be kind of cumbersome for you to constantly retell it to do, just put it in the Gemini markdown file and it'll remember it going forward. Gemini also has the ability to have its own memory as a tool outside of a specific repository or folder. And if you just go down here and tell it to remember, you say something like, remember the sky is blue most days. If you type something like that, Gemini will actually have a global memory that it'll be able to write to as well. So there's a global memory, and then there is a project-specific, workspace-specific type of memory, and that would be these Gemini.markdown files. You can also have a settings file in this Gemini folder as well, and you can add different you can add different files beyond just Gemini.markdown to be included in your context if you want to extend that to other file names. Okay, so that's just a quick preview of this. I basically already have like an ongoing approach that I use. I would say the best way to start with these Gemini markdown files is just to do one file called Gemini.markdown at the root level of your repository and work on it till it starts to feel messy. And then split it up and start putting your Gemini files like distributed in your project. And then at some point, if you would like to, help yourself to go look at this repo on GitHub, because what I actually do is I actually have just a folder system where the folder name represents what the Gemini file is about, and then the Gemini file is the content, and I have front matter here. That way I can eventually work with the metadata or possibly do searches across the files. But that's for another time. Okay, so these Gemini files are extremely helpful, and Cascade cannot necessarily read them, but Gemini CLI can, and that's what makes it an incredible tool for working in context with a project, because you have the ability to do way more than if you were to just like copy and paste code from ChatGPT or the Gemini, the web tool. You know, with those, they don't actually know the code you're working with. They don't know the active state of that code or anything. This puts your AI chatbot right in your working environment. Okay, so Gemini can do anything in the terminal that you'd normally be able to do in the terminal. It can execute terminal commands and do all that stuff for us as well. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually instruct Gemini to go in and read the project scope document. You're going to see that my typing has become progressively messier the more I've used AI. I think that's one of the symptoms of overusage, is your typing just gets real sloppy. Okay, so it's read the project scope markdown document, and it understands the project scope, technology stack, and development guidelines. So what I want to do is I'm going to set up a sprint here because I want to work in an organized way, and I don't want to metaphorically chase the dragon when I'm building. I want to build toward something that's clear in my mind. So before I jump into coding and jump into building and making things and making decisions, I'm going to actually take this project scope, and I'm going to go to this document called current, and I'm going to set up the basic tasks that I need to complete with a goal in mind for this sprint. And for me, a sprint right now is just like an abstract quantity of time. Doesn't need to be 2 weeks. It's just a way to group effort for me at this moment. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing we tell Gemini here is please review the project scope, and I want to set up a new current sprint. This new current sprint is focused on just the tasks related to setting up a placeholder application that uses Tauri, SolidJS, TS. I hope that I've never used SolidJS before, so I'm kind of like, is there a TypeScript? I'm sure there is. But okay, so I'll use JavaScript if there isn't. So placeholder application that uses Tauri, SolidJS, TypeScript, or that just uses the basic technologies mentioned to build an app with, let's say build a blank page app, or wait, let's say build a app with some text from the database displayed on the screen, and then have a workflow on GitHub that will run automations for testing, linting, I'll run automations for the development branch, and also for the main branch, with the main branch producing an official build. Now, when you're writing a prompt here, you can be like trying to tell it exactly what to do point by point and step by step, but you're never going to necessarily have everything there, especially if you're improvising as you're coding. So what I always do is, in addition to telling it what I think I want it to do, I will also try to explain to it like, what is the intention here, so that it can have a stronger chance to make inferences that are linked to what I actually want and not just what I literally said. So I'll say the intention here is to set up an extremely simple full stack application that also has a full cycle so that we can do releases of builds from the onset instead of releases of the build from the onset instead of having to configure it later. And I want to have a full another thing too that I'm going to tell it is that this app is created and managed by a single person, and we need to make sure that it is sufficient for basic best practices, but the implementation details are free and not overly designed for the available engineering labor or engineering capacity. Now, the reason why I'm telling it this is because, and this is like good information to know, like as a general developer, if you go online and you're like trying to find the best way to build a server, and you're like trying to build a server that's safe, secure, and you're trying to take yourself seriously and stuff, you're going to find every piece of advice plus the kitchen sink plus the baby, and the neighbor's grandma. You're going to get everything, okay? And they're going to tell you need to have all these like things. You need to pay all this money to have these security scans and get all these premium tools. And in fact, you can even buy like some pre-built toolage that costs $8 a month. They're gonna like give you all these things that you should be doing in theory, and of course, as the risk of your software and your liability goes up with your company or your product, do those things. Okay, you'd be crazy to not do them. But as you're building, especially if you're doing like a case study or something that's just for yourself or something that's meant to be for open source or just an experiment, trying to do all that at once is going to make for a extremely slow process, and you may never get to building your application. So the point here is that we don't need all the bells and whistles. I literally just want to have something that can get me the basics so I'm not making gross errors and producing really, really terrible code. And we can always enhance or improve the pipelines and automations later on. And we will likely need to do that as our application grows, okay? But we don't want it to give us enterprise level architecture. We don't want an enterprise level developer operation workflow. That's way above and beyond what we need right now, okay? So I'm just kind of giving it some idea of exactly like to what degree to do this, okay? So we're telling it some things we want it to do. We're telling it our intentions and what we hope the outcomes will be. And then we're also giving it some information about the degree that we want it to do this thing for us. And I'll just say here, this is clearly not an enterprise application, but it may grow into one. For now, let's just make smart and efficient decisions about the DevOps automations and whatnot. And notice I have typos in here. As long as they're not ridiculous, they're fine. I don't go back and fix those. Since, AI is really good at making inferences and text completion, it is wonderful at fixing or understanding you beyond your typos anyways, so that doesn't really matter. Okay, so it has taken my request. Let's see what it says. The goal for this sprint is to establish a foundational end-to-end CI/CD pipeline for a minimal viable application that demonstrates the core technology stack. This, it says MVA, interesting, it should be MVP, will be a Tauri application with SolidJS front end and Rust backend that fetches and displays text from SQLite database. Excuse me. Given the single developer context, the emphasis on efficient best practices without over-engineering, here's a proposed plan. Oh, oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, so first we're going to do the scaffolding. That's the word I was looking for, scaffolding. Initialize a new Tauri project with SolidJS for the front end and Rust for the back end. Set up basic project structure for front end and back end per the project scope guidelines. And integrate Rust SQLite, SQLite, okay, simple database, Rust functions to initialize the database. So Tauri, I guess I should talk about Tauri really quick. Let's take a look at the Tauri website. Give me just 1 second to open this up in my other browser. Okay, so this is Tauri. Okay, so let me ask you a question. If you're a developer, have you ever as a web developer thought to yourself, man, this be boring? Okay, maybe you haven't thought of it like that, but have you ever thought to yourself, like, sometimes making web apps is like, it's cool and everything, but like, that's like only one part of appage. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's all sorts of other types of apps that I would like to be able to make, but I only know how to make web pages, essentially, single page web applications. Tauri is a way, it's like a bridge. Think of it as like a bridge, okay? If your goal is to migrate from being a web developer, which is a bit saturated right now, Tauri is a great way to kind of make a little bit of a transition to learn about how to make applications that are targeting desktop and mobile and native platforms. Now, if you've worked in React Native, that's cool, great, wonderful. This is not unlike it in terms of the overall objective. If you've worked with Electron, wonderful. This is actually comparable to Electron, but supposedly easier, but most importantly, faster. Okay, so Tauri is just a secure cross-platform framework for making desktop and native-like applications. You can deploy to Linux, Android, you can do Mac OS, and you can also do Windows. And the beautiful part about this is that all of your wonderful front-end, JavaScript, HTML, CSS skills, they're welcomed at this party. The front end for Tauri is based on JavaScript, and you can use React, Solid, Vue, whatever you want to use. And then the back end is Rust. And then around all of that is the actual Tauri framework and tooling, which basically will package all of this together and treat it as a single application. And there's some like macros and stuff you can do with it. And essentially, the end goal is that with Tauri, you can make an installable application that a person can run on their computer, just like any other application. And that's why I'm using it. So that's my goal, at least. So I've never used Tauri before, so I'm going to be basically figuring this out live with you as we go. But this, to me, I've just been so excited to learn this. And that's going to be one of the things I do in this preliminary setup here. Okay, so we're going to use SolidJS for the front end. All we will be doing is retrieving a message and storing it. And then for the CI/CD pipeline, I feel like this is going to be like a pretty big part of our process. I'm going to be honest with you. I have never done a release of a software that I've created. I've been a part of release cycles, obviously, for my enterprise level software engineering work in my career, but hardly responsible for it and hardly informed about all the machinations and details. So that's going to be a learning for me in this as well. So what I'm going to do is, I like this plan here, these proposed tasks. I do believe that this is obviously a very simplified form of it, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it the okay to turn this into a set of tasks that we'll put into the current file. And we're going to turn that into a checklist, but we're going to also build it out because we need some more detail in here before we unleash our AI to start building this. So I'm going to say, this is great. Can you add these tasks to our current.md file? Now, you can also get a relative path for it as well. and just paste it in here. The @ symbol is how you point to a file or a path when you're using the Gemini CLI. I'm actually going to just really quickly change my layout because I think I would prefer to have this on the right side. Yeah, there we go. Need it to be tall. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and write. Now, when you're using Gemini CLI out the box, you have to give it express permission to make changes to the file system and to also run terminal commands for you. Now, the word of caution is I would never recommend just giving AI the ability to run on its own, on its own volition, essentially, and to do whatever it wants without any sort of boundaries, because you could look up and, it's like use all your tokens or, charged up your bank account. But however, if there are certain things that you trust it to do or certain types of changes, you can always give it the ability to make those types of changes always. I am very reluctant to do it, but help yourself, honey, if you want to. I'm just going to go ahead and say, yes, I want this file to be written. Now you can see we have it here. And let's go ahead and take a look. I actually have a markdown. I thought I had like a markdown plugin. Oh, I have it on my. Let me go ahead and get one. I thought I had a plugin that was better for markdown. I don't know if this is the one that I want. Yeah, let's try that one. And also I do want markdown lint too. Okay, so let's see if that did what we wanted it to do. I never read the instructions when I get plugins. Okay, so I think all that really did for us was it just gave us some linting here, which is cool. Oh, it's all in one file. Okay, we'll fix that. Quick fix. And we'll just make this shell. Now we'll just do text. I think we are good on that. And my little preview thing here didn't come out the way I wanted, but that is okay. Oh, this has errors too. Okay, we'll just fix those. Okay, so let's preview this again. Okay, so what I would like to do now is I'm going to try to get some more detail in this. Now, working with AI is a lot like training a dog. Dog's my logo. When you train a dog, you're really training the human being. The dog obviously is going to remember to the best of its ability, but a lot of time the effort, in working with AI is really trying to get yourself to think more clearly so that you can give better instruction and be more consistent. And also, you're trying to remove conceptual drift as well. So what happens is that when we're trying to develop an idea about something and we're unclear about it, we as human beings, we tend to drift. Okay. We tend to say, oh yeah, let's do this thing. Oh no, I really meant this other thing. Oh no, I meant this other thing. Or do it like this. And the next thing you know, the idea that you started out with is not anything like what you actually made, right? So in order to reduce conceptual drift, which is going to result in higher quality interaction with our AI bot, we need to actually put forth effort into having a plan that has a decent amount of detail, or at least enough so that we understand what we want and we've kind of challenged ourselves. And AI is going to actually help us do that. So let's just say here we need to work on these project scaffolding section. Can you break it down into steps. And those steps need to be a checklist so we can keep track. I would always keep a checklist. If you use Cascade, Cascade is really good. It has a planning mode that essentially manages a checklist on its own. I would say that having a checklist within your planning sprint files in your repo, that's also really smart too, because then if you have an issue with the session, or if you want to write up a report or something or whatever it is, you just have the ability to go back and see where you left off. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, initialize Tauri project. Verify basic Tauri application runs and compiles successfully. Set up the project basic structure for front end and back end. Okay, so I think that this part here needs some clarification. So can you add more clarifying detail to... Okay. Always read what it's giving you. Never just push enter and assume. And you're going to learn so much when you do it that way too. Even if it is giving you things that are good, you still want to read them. Okay, so set up basic project structure for front end and back end, some components. Okay, sure. Okay, so this just meant like the file structure. Okay. Perform an initial commit of the scaffolded project. Integrate Rust SQLite. Okay, so this part seems simple. I don't know what the Tauri setup involves. Yeah, oh, you can do it with npm. Okay. Cool. Okay, so yeah, we can do this. I'm wondering how this is going to work with the directory that's already set up. I could probably just jerry rig it and copy and paste from another directory into it if I need to. Okay, so prerequisites. Let's see what that is. I already have Rust on my computer. Okay, well, I'm gonna come back to that. Actually, let's do it right now. Check my Rust version. I've used Rust only like 5 times in my life, I promise you. So I don't even really know how to use it. I know enough to read it, but not necessarily like an expert. So can we update it? Oh, I haven't used Rust since 2023. Dang. Okay, cool. So while that's doing that, so I just need to have Rust and Node.js. Oh, this is a Windows thing. Okay. I have Xcode. Okay, cool. Ooh, so it doesn't have specific configuration set up for... Oh, okay, it has Vite. Okay. I'm using Vite, and I'm going to use Vite to build my SolidJS application. Okay. Okay. Can you let me open up another terminal here. Okay, I think we're good on this version of Node. Okay, so what's all this? Oh, okay. You're probably wondering why there's this thing that you guys didn't see before. I actually have all of my LinkedIn posts and Tumblr posts because I've been making comments on each platform about this repo. But I actually have every post I've ever made about this app saved, and I'm going to continue to use it to build more social media content as I build the project. So I like to keep those in the repo. In fact, let me go ahead and do a quick commit really quick here, and then we will get back on here. And we'll have a break here in about 10 minutes too, by the way. Okay, so this looks good. Integrate REST SQL, create simple database schema. Sure. Implement Rust function. Tauri command to initialize database table. They don't exist. To insert default message if the table is empty. To retrieve the message from the database. Create a basic. Okay, so one thing is that I do not have SQLite installed. So let's go ahead and check that out and see what we need to do. Let me see if there is a command line way to install this. Let's actually ask here. Wait. What's the best way to install SQLite? Oh, so we don't. Let me. Okay, so it's saying that actually it would just be built into the application. Okay. Okay, so I may not. Here, let's just do brew install SQLite. Otherwise, it'll just be built into our app, it seems like. Okay. Cool beans. Okay. Ew, I have an outdated forms. I haven't used Homebrew in forever. Forever. I think this must be the most viewers I've ever had concurrently. This is probably the most viewers I've ever had in a stream, to be completely honest. Um, Unfortunately, I've been ignoring the chat, so I have no clue what's going on in there. Oh, it's empty. Oops. It's empty. Okay. So SQLite is installing. Anything else? Let's continue reading down. Okay, so with the front end, for the front end display, or for the front end, I want to be sure to use Vite to build, and also have tail. I really don't like Tailwind. I don't know. I don't want to. I don't know. Let me not even like go on a hot take right now. Tailwind is. It's just like. I don't know. But I do want to use Cobalt. I think this is what's called. There's a SolidJS framework called Cobalt. I think that's how you pronounce it. So this is a UI kit, and I'll probably just use it. as plainly as possible. And then later on, we'll worry about the styling. I don't know if I will actually stick with Tailwind. But this is a UI kit for SolidJS. So that will get us what we need for the UI kit. We will make the UI. Also, let's do Tailwind with a global theme. Actually, I'll just say I want this styling to be set up for effective mobile theming. And I probably also want to reinforce this idea of global theming and design in my Gemini context files because, once again, AI is really bad at understanding the bigger picture, the context of how code is like being written across a file system. And if you leave it to its own devices, it will not necessarily use tokens for holding, not like AI tokens, but tokens as far as like constant variables. It won't use constant variables necessarily to to do styling, and so you'll just end up with like a bunch of files that have all these inline styles, and it's just like messy. It's a lot of repetition, and then they'll be like all different enough to where you can't really consolidate, and it's just a big mess. So I want to make sure that in this MVP, or well, we're calling it an MVA, a minimal viable application. We want to make sure that we have it set up so that we're guiding ourselves and our agent towards doing all of the styling and stuff in a way that's like meant to be modular and easy to configure as like a top level thing. Oh, it's trying to jump to the working part. We don't need that yet. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, can you create a new standard for .gemini? This will be for how to manage styling. Basically, I want the standard to reinforce the idea that we are using constants / tokens to hold values for style, and I want to hold objects for styling that are meant to be reusable, and also global styling for Tailwind and theming much as possible to make managing style easy regardless of what we use to do it. There you go. That was really sloppily written, but I think it gets the point. Let's see what it comes up with. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm telling Gemini, hey, in the future, I need you to respect this new standard that we have just created specific to styling. And when I tell it to do this, I'm telling it to make a new standard, which means add it to this standards folder. And this is a front end specific rule. And this one is for styling. Now, one thing it did not do is I need, I need this to also be a Gemini file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it finish what it's doing right now. I'm going to make sure that all this information is inside Gemini.md. Because if it's not in there, then it's not going to be considered a part of the immediate context. A subdirectory called styling. Now, this is all going to be much easier to do when and if Google ever gets the ability to do glob patterns for the context files inclusion, because then I can actually have some other way to name these files beyond just having them all called Gemini.md. You could, in theory, have just one Gemini file for everything. However, as a human being, this system is just like slightly easier for me to just have file folders that are all like named for the thing, and then having the Gemini files within them. So, oh, it's making some edits here. Okay, so now we have produced a new standard. This is specific for styling. I'm going to have to go back and actually manage and simplify all my context, because as you can see here, there's 14 files. When I do memory refresh, so now it has 14 files. That's all of the Gemini files that exist in this entire repo. And you can see here that there's 32,900 characters. So that means that all these characters are going to be sent with every prompt that I make. And in addition to all the text or some amount of text from the previous responses, basically the point is here, you need to manage the number of characters that are in your context as a whole, because it is going to greatly contribute to token consumption. I happen to know that this number is not that bad right now, so we can get by with this. But we need to introduce some more sophisticated approaches to using Gemini.md for context later on, possibly by offloading certain parts of the information to be in separate files that are not Gemini context files, because we don't always necessarily need to have as verbose of information directly in these files. But we will do that as its own dedicated effort, not right now, however. Okay, so yeah, we have 32,000 across 15 files. Now, I think that our plan that we have created here is good enough for now. Let's just do one quick review. Oh, let's say that for the pipeline setup, I would like to also have the ability to manually run the dev pipeline on a feature branch. Also, I need the ability to easily run these same exact checks locally so that I'm not dependent on running them only on GitHub. When it comes to setting up CI/CD pipelines, you want to be able to confirm them in your local environment, because it's essentially free, minus the cost of electricity for your computers using the CPU, of course. But it's essentially free for you to run these things on your computer. If your only means of running these processes is in the cloud, you're going to find that GitHub actually has some limitations up until the point where it starts to charge you. So you're only able to get a certain amount of compute hours, basically, on GitHub for free. But if we can run these steps in our local environment, then it's going to give us a higher likelihood that they're going to pass when they get to the internet, so that we don't have to spend a lot of time rerunning things and then therefore wasting money. So I'm just letting it know that I want to be able to run these pipelines on any branch manually, whereas they will run automatically if it's on a dev branch or a main branch, respectively. So let's have it at that. And then once it does that, then, I just need to clarify the front. I need to just add a little bit more detail for the front end part, and then I think we're done. And we can take a break and move on. So let's just give it a moment to finish. Okay. Ideally, I would like to have my pipelines use scripts that are defined in my project. I don't know what the best Oh, we're no building right now. We are still planning. I'll let you know when we need to build. Please stop trying to run create Tauri. Sometimes you gotta tell it to stop doing stuff because it's gonna want to, go into the next thing. Okay, so what was the other thing? Okay, so we need to say for front end display. Can you be more specific about the front end? I intend on using Vite to build SolidJS and TypeScript. And also, we need some tooling that will allow us to run commands at the root level, especially for local CI/CD type of stuff. What do you recommend? Okay, so I think I can actually manually point any workflow to a branch. Is this thing still downloading? Oh, it's updating things. Hold on now. Okay. Okay. Y'all wasn't gonna tell me this thing's still over here running. I guess it's trying to update everything. I'm tripping. I'm tripping. But speaking of the devil, I should do brew upgrade. Okay. Yeah, let's let it do its thing. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so a package JSON at the project's root directory. Okay, I don't know why I like Makefile so much, but I guess because you can leave comments in it, and I like that. But I think for like versioning and all that stuff, this might end up being the best option. Okay. Okay. Let's go ahead and add that. I just like make files. I don't know. I mean, yeah. It'd be so nice if you could have make files and just instead of package JSON for that. Okay, so let's see. I just feel like this guide could use some more light touches of detail so that it fully aligns with the direction of the project scope, but not actual code snippets. I gotta take my dog out to go potty here in a second. Right, that. Okay, so we're gonna do this and then we're gonna take a break. I'm going to have it just add some last details here. I wonder if I can get by with my dog just like sitting out while we work on this. Okay, so the... Oh, there we go. It's waiting for me. Uh-oh. Did it not finish? Database. Nope, that didn't work. Try that last part again. Let me switch. Sometimes the credentials gets all like weird. Let's try that again. Okay, apply the prior changes again. I don't know what that message means. Now it's confused. Okay, so it's confused, so I'm just going to have to refeed it this here. And then we'll go on break. There's more that I want to do, but it started taking too long. So here is the thing that didn't work. Try it again. Oh, that's so tacky looking, but it's going to understand it. We lost our music. Oh, the formatting needs to be fixed, please. See, this is one of the things with yeah, this is one of the things with Gemini, is that sometimes it just all of a sudden isn't very smart with the Flash model, especially when it runs into an issue. Yeah, it can all of a sudden sort of like stop making smart decisions. But that's kind of why you should work in chunks. And also, you have the ability to compress or reset the context window as well, which can also help alleviate if you find that it keeps doing the same thing wrong over and over again. Sometimes it finds itself in this like sort of weird recursive loop. So that's usually a sign that you need to reset your context window. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break now. When we come back, we're going to do a final read of this file here, just to make sure like we didn't accidentally mess up anything or miss anything. And then we can start with initializing the application. So don't go too far, but if you go anywhere, make sure you make your way back to the pack, and I'll be right here where I'm at. So give me like, let's say a good 15 minutes, and we'll be back. So that'll be 10:50 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay, I'll see you in a bit. Peace. Okay, I have returned from my break, and if you're just joining us, we are working on the Comic Panel app project initialization. Basically, I worked on this application last year and have decided to rebuild this comic application from the ground up with the same goal in mind, but as a desktop application, whereas it was a web application beforehand. So if you watched the first part of the stream, we talked about the initial application that was made as a prototype. We looked through some of the features, and then we also talked about how I used that to basically create a project scope document, and then from that extract some specific tasks that we're going to work on as we begin the process of making this from scratch again. And of course, we're using AI, our lovely and friendly GEMINI is our preferred AI over here, but you can do this with Anthropic, CLI, or any other CLI or coding agent tool if you prefer. Okay, so before we went on our break, we had a little minor hiccup because it was getting some of the markdown messed up here. So we're going to do a quick read through of this current sprint's work before we actually start to jump in. The first thing I want to do is I want to actually compress the context. So if you type in /compress, it will actually take the context that it has and it will reduce it to a summary so that you use fewer tokens. And we will also do memory refresh as well to make sure we got all of our context files there. Okay, that is like basically a short version of what you could also do with just simply restarting. I'm going to momentarily switch to the Pro model. Oh, we have some information here. Okay. I don't think I even need this, but it says I need to return my terminal. Okay, we can actually just trash that terminal. Okay, so I'm gonna really quickly, can you make sure that all the items in current.md are in fact check have check boxes so we can use this as we work to keep track. My dog is like having fun or somewhere in the other room. Oh, down. Down. I can hear you, bro. Down. If you have a dog, like, does your dog do this thing? Sorry, I was like off screen. Does your dog do this thing where like you tell them to do something and they just stare at you? Like, does anyone else have that? Their dog do that? Like he'll just seriously just like look at me and he'll look at me like this. And I'm just like, I'll just like, dude, sit, or whatever the thing I'm trying to get him to do is. He'll just like look at me, and then after a few moments of a stare down, he'll just do it, But it's like, come on, bro. I know you're a teenager, but I'm the big dog. Woof woof. You gotta let these people know. Let these creatures know. Hey, I'm just being silly. But yeah, he's over there in the other room. I think I started this stream or this YouTube channel when he was a puppy, and now he is 1 year and a month old. So he's big. He's very big. He's like 70 pounds. And he's super friendly and super energetic. And if I don't watch him, he will like destroy my apartment. Okay, so it's converting this into a checklist. I kind of just did that myself. I literally just like should have just did that myself, but it's cool. I already did it, so it can't be undone. Let's go ahead and read through this now, just to make sure this all makes sense. So our sprint goal, and for us a sprint, oh, excuse me, this little frappuccino. So for us, a sprint is not a period of time. Okay, normally if you've never had like a software development job, a sprint for you might not be a clear concept, but like in a job, a sprint is just a a quantity of time that is used for a specific allotment of work that has already been designed, curated, and selected. In fact, let's go over to our friend and use a flowchart to help us with this. So let's use freeform. I'm gonna actually diagram this out. This would be useful, probably as like a clip or something. Okay, so whenever you're a software developer or working on like a development team in general, even non-development teams will use this. Think about what you do as being this big circle, okay? And this circle is a loopable process that will repeat itself in iterations as you go around and around. And we'll just call this our sprint. But remember that a sprint is just a fancy way of talking about the actual effort that we make when we're trying to iterate on something as we learn about it and as we're responding to it, which is a part of like the methodology of Agile and Scrum. The idea is that as you work on something, you will learn things and that they will help you to course correct so that you don't have to have it all figured out all at once. So we'll say the sprint conceptually just stands for a round of work and it is meant to result in an iteration and advancing our iteration of whatever it is that we're making. Okay, so let's make this 24 and we'll just put that right here. Okay. Okay, so what I'm basically saying in my document here is that for this sprint, I'm going to be essentially going from having an app that does not exist okay, this app does not exist at the beginning. My effort, however, will be to initialize it. And we're moving in this direction right here. We're moving in this, we're around the circle in this direction. My dog is doing such a good job in the other room. I know he wants to play with me because he hears me talking. He's being you're being such a good boy. You gotta let him know. Okay, so we're going from application that doesn't exist to one that is initialized. And then our definition of initialization here means that we have a front end. Oops. This Moonlander keyboard is great, but sometimes it trips me up. We have a front end, we have a back end, or we'll just say a server, API server. We have SQLite. I hate the way SQLite spell. I think it should have 2 L's. And then we also will have Tauri for packaging and building. Okay, and Tauri is built with Rust, and the front end is built with Tauri and the application server are both built with Rust. We're going to use SolidJS for the front end with Vite, and then this is just our definition of initialization. After we initialize this for this sprint, we're going to want to take it one step further, and we're going to want to actually set up a basic CI/CD. And we'll do this on GitHub using GitHub workflows. And then we'll take that one step further and we're going to try to, we're actually going to create an official build and release for this software as well. for the software. And by the time that we finish all of this, the resulting goal of this sprint is that, and this is actually coming outside of a sprint because there's no prior state. And we'll just put this line right here. And we'll say that the resulting thing that we want as a consequence of all this effort is that we will have a end to end life cycle for a full stack application. Okay, in more or less words, that is what our goal here is. Okay, so this is basically a visual description of what our sprint means to us and what we're trying to do. And by thinking about this stuff beforehand, like I said, you're saving yourself a lot of heartache, because one of the biggest issues with making things with AI is when you have conceptual drift. And also there's actually a greater concept behind it that I'm really fascinated with. And it's just the idea that, like, when you work with AI, if you don't know what you want, then how can you expect AI to work effectively and efficiently for you, you know? And so going through these planning steps gives you a lot of collateral that you can leverage in your relationship with AI, so that as you're giving it instructions and stuff, it knows specifically what you want. And so it has to do a lot less guessing, you know, a lot less inference making. You're making the task much easier for it. And, you know, the other part too is that even if you don't necessarily want to make your project with other people, having clear documentation makes it at least possible to get help when you need it. If you're working at a job, it is definitely important to still do these planning steps, even on your own, because these also are like proof of work, and also allows other people to have something that they can look at to see what you're doing. Okay, so this described flow here is what we have encapsulated in our project, essentially right here. Okay, so essentialize new Tauri project. We'll say that this is initializing Tauri, which means creating the server and the front end. A note about Tauri is that Tauri is going to be responsible for spinning up our application for us. So it needs to be given instructions, a set of instructions for how to do that. I've been streaming for 2 hours and a half. I'm doing pretty good though. I'm going strong. Okay. So set up basic project structure. Cool. Initial git commit. Okay, sure. Create simple database schema. Sure. Okay. Oh, it's missing a detail here. We need to tell it specifically to use the Cobalt UI kit. To use the Cobalt UI kit for the front end. I'm probably going to use the Hyena styling framework that I've created for myself. I actually have my own UI kit that I'm working on. I don't want to introduce it just yet, but oh, let's see here. Can we update the front? My dog is right next to me. He's snuck in here. Get out, let me work. 1 second, y'all. Let me take care of him. 1 second. Give me just one momento, por favor. Okay. Okay, so okay, so it was doing the wrong thing. We need to just tell it to update the front end display section of the current .js file or current.md with this detail, please. One thing I do notice about GEMINI is that it has a strong desire or bias, whatever you want to call it, to implement. There is actually a shortcut you can do to turn off its ability to edit. I don't use it, but I do notice that sometimes when you're trying to get it to plan or think through stuff before making a change, it kind of just like jumps the gun, you know. Okay, so I think this is. Oh, do I need to refresh this? Oh, it already says it here. Okay, Cobalt Core Toolkit, right, accessible and style component premise, and I want to use a toolkit like a UI kit because I have accessibility in mind, and I want my user to be able to potentially use whatever they need for that. You know, I don't want to judge or assume. And by using a UI kit, UI kits usually come pre-configured for accessibility. Ooh, excuse me. They usually come pre-configured for accessibility. I haven't really looked. Oh, here it is, accessible. Okay, I haven't really looked too deeply into this one. There aren't as many options for toolkits with SolidJS, but looks like this one. Okay, so it seems like it's pretty well aligned. One last comment too, like even if your UI kit isn't the best, the nice part about doing the UI kit is it results in a lot less code in your source code, so that even if you did need to go back and refactor your application's UI, it's just a lot easier to go in, pinpoint, or just change things progressively to use a different UI framework, instead of having just like a bunch of like boilerplate code and stuff, you know. So even if this isn't the long-term option we want, you know, at least it'll be relatively simple to change. I actually prefer a whole nother framework. Let's see, it's called Prime UI. That's what it's called. Wait, is this it here? Prime React, not the YouTube channel, but it's actually the name of a UI framework. It's this one right here. So this is my favorite because I think that this UI kit actually lends itself to kind of have the feeling of like native applications. And I like some of the options that it has around menus and stuff. I just think that this looks so good. Look at that. So this is my favorite, but unfortunately there isn't a version of this that is for SolidJS. So maybe in the future, maybe find a way to adapt this or do something that is similar. But I was kind of hoping to be able to leverage something that's already kind of like this, and maybe we can even just try to find maybe another framework or something in the future. But for now, the Cobalt one will work. When I looked into it, it seemed like Cobalt is probably one of the more popular ones, and also it seemed to, because it's unstyled, it seems like it also offers some performance advantage out of the box because of just being much simpler. I don't know though. This is not my area of strength, so I'm open-minded to change that, but we just needed something for now. Okay, so that's great. That's good. Okay. One last thing is for the CI/CD, a requirement is that I can run the dev branch pipeline on a feature branch. Is that something I can do on demand, or do I need a special setup? I forget. I think on GitHub you can actually just manually run and target a branch, but we'll just have it. Let me know if that's wrong. And then the other thing is, like I said, I've never done a release to build, so I'll just tell it here. I've never done a release, but I want to do that just for the proof of concept. Can you please write the instructions, or write more about that process and how it works for the main branch workflow, and please do some online research. I have Context 7 for one of my MCP servers. Context 7 is an MCP server that allows your AI agent to be able to connect with documentation, primary documentation for things, so that it doesn't rely just on the language model for how to write code or stuff. It can actually look at the latest version of whatever language or tool you're working with. However, I'm paranoid, so I still have it just go do like a basic Google search sometimes, especially when I'm having it make a decision about like not just how the documentation of something is written out, but also like how to use it for like a pattern or something. Okay, so it's going to update this for me. Oh, this is missing. Oh, it has tests right here. Okay, so test is there. Okay, so for main branch, the goal of the workflow is to fully automate the release process when the code is merged into main. This workflow will build the application for all target platforms. We only need to target Mac OS at the moment. Sorry, y'all. We're only going to target Mac OS, and the other stuff we'll just have to wait. Trying to manage multiple targets, even though I have the ability to do them, I wouldn't be able to test them. I would only be able to test the Linux one because I have a Raspberry Pi, which I probably should do. I could probably have some type of webhook that runs the application on my Raspberry Pi or in a virtual environment. I don't know. That's something for later on, but that's definitely a consideration because I do want to be able to have quality control for my app, for my users who are going to be on different operating systems, but that's just too far ahead to think about right now. So for now, I'm just going to limit it to Mac OS. Create a new GitHub release, upload the application bundles as release artifacts. Okay. I also need to think about a distributor at some point. But I don't want to set up, like I'm not going to use SourceForge right now, but I want to build having in mind that this released application, this released version is going to end up in some type of distribution platform. I just don't know what that is exactly. What I'm thinking is that I could have a pipeline in the future that will actually release it and then make it available on my website for people to download. And the version on my website, maybe multiple versions possibly, could just be current to whatever's been released. And then maybe all the major versions are there, the latest versions of each major version. So to host the artifact or something like that. I just don't want to build this in a way that is not scalable or not. Like whenever I'm making software, I'm always thinking about avoiding one-way roads. Like, you know, if you're driving, right? Think about how, like, if you're driving, you don't want to end up at a dead end, you know, somewhere where you can't turn around. Well, I think about that with my code a lot too, especially when working with AI. I don't want to make decisions that could have like these huge ripple effects, negative ones at least. And I want to reduce that as much as possible. So you'll find that I'm oftentimes in my prompts kind of telling it a little bit about the direction, a little bit about some of the why, and giving it a little bit of a projection about what we're aiming for. So even if it's making something simple, it does it with something else in mind. And that's a really powerful way to write your prompts. Okay, so future distribution, the workflow will be designed with modularity in mind while the initial release. A separate subsequent job can easily be added in the future to download these artifacts and upload them to GCP bucket for website distribution. Okay, that's good enough for me. As long as they live somewhere and there's a way to get them. Okay, so, okay, this looks good. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a commit here. Make a commit here. And this is the work that I'm going to be doing basically for the rest of this week. Well, really tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday. Yeah, tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday. And then I'm going to be streaming 3 days a week from here on out as a part of a regular build in public stream. So I'll be revisiting the scope document. We'll be adding new things into our sprints. This current document will get archived, and then a new one will be made, of course, as we progress in the sprints. Okay, so now that we're here, I want to do just one last check. We're on the Gemini Pro model, so it's good at thinking. I'm just going to give it one last directive here. I'm going to say, I think we are ready to start working in a bit. First, I would like you to check the current .md plan and make sure it aligns with the project scope. And if there are any Any issues of alignment, please let me know. The goal here is to get a full life cycle app up and running so that we running with a simple placeholder app, and then we can build out the features in the future without having to worry so much about basic CI/CD and release strategy. Whoever left me a like, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I like you too. I'm just gonna let you know that. I like it a lot. I like likes. I like a lot of likes. Okay, I reviewed the current. Okay, here's summary alignment. Okay, there's no immediate issue. Correctly identified. Sorry. Okay, cool. Okay, and I'm just sometimes I like to just say, okay, do you have any extra advice or anything to say about our current.md document that might help us avoid issues? I just want to see what you think. The floor is yours. The floor is yours. If they could just find a way to make it where the CLI version of Gemini can talk, and then it could be my co-host, that would be epic. Okay, let's see what it says here. Oh, okay. We wanted to do that. So basically what this is saying is that there's a configuration for the bundle identifier, and if we don't get it correct, then we won't be able to do automatic updates on, we won't be able to like do code signing for automatic updates basically. So I think the idea is that when you have an app on when you have an app that is installed on someone's computer, it's not like how we run apps as a developer. When you're a developer, for example, you can just reinstall or you can just update the repository and rebuild and then run the app or whatever. But when you're a user, you don't do any of that kind of stuff. In fact, you just do one installation, and that installation gets its files and whatnot updated whenever the developer releases those updates. And so there needs to be like a type of a way to confirm that this app is, you know, aligned with whatever its source is, so that when automatic updates are provided, that can be done in a safe, secure way, and you know exactly where that's coming. And if you don't get that identifier correct, then you won't be able to do the automatic updates. So it's suggesting that here. This is not an area that I'm super knowledgeable about. This is my first time using Tauri, so I think that makes sense. Detailed error standards for error handling. While you don't need the full implementations now, ignoring it completely in this financial sprint can make debugging very difficult. Subtask implementing a basic result type in Rust that can be serialized to the front end. When the front end invokes the back end, it should be able to distinguish a successful result and an error. Oh, okay, yeah. I guess, what, does Rust not have that? Okay, sure. Caching. Okay, yes. Yes, we need to prepare. Okay, so these all sound great. Okay, so what it was saying here is that my app will obviously at some point have environment variables and things that need to be kept secret for whatever reasons, including API tokens and stuff like that. but also I might have credentials that are needed in order to do deployment stuff. Let's say if I'm trying to propagate my build or my release to a platform or something like that, I might have credentials that are needed in order for my runner to do that on my behalf. Whatever the reason is, I do need to set up GitHub so that it can be able to store potential environment variables and stuff like that. So it's recommending that for me as well, specifically for the Tauri stuff right now. Okay, so I'm just gonna say these all sound great. Add them to current.md. Now, a lot of people will probably question, like, what is the efficacy of using AI to help do things you've never done before? And I would say, okay, well then what is the efficacy of doing, literally following a tutorial for something you've never done before? I think it's the same thing. The only difference is whether or not you stop to read and actually digest what you're doing. If you're just clicking OK and just running at the speed of light, then obviously you won't be learning anything. But if you use AI to solve novel or very difficult problems that you couldn't solve otherwise, as long as you take the time to understand how that solution actually worked and why it worked and what happened, then you're going to remember it. Unless you don't have good memory, then I don't know, you're screwed, I guess. But for most people, if you just think about AI as being just like adjacent to tutorials and don't think of it as being any deeper than that, right? Like if there's not a tutorial for something that doesn't exist, then AI might not be as good at doing it. Now, tutorial doesn't have to mean YouTube video. It can mean documentation, get started guides, blogs, anything that could be used to train the LLM. But the point is that when you use AI, treat it like it's teaching you something, not just like it's doing something for you. And you'll get a lot more mileage, and you also become more proficient outside of just using AI. Maybe you won't be like great with all like the syntax and like the little details like that, but you will understand what's happening, why it's happening, and what it's doing, and you'll be more likely to create good results. So please read it. Please read it. Okay, so right now all it's doing is it's just updating my my current file here. It's adding Tauri config stuff. Okay, cool. Yes, but basic serialization type and Rust, cool. Another thing I wanted to do is I want to have a custom logger. Okay, let me just think about this. When you're working on an app, you will have errors, and these errors need to be easy to find. You need to have the ability, basically, for your app to run in some type of debugging mode so that you can maximize your ability to look at all the different things happening in order to compare and find, incongruences or issues or whatever, especially for bugs that are not like throwing an exception. But the other thing that you need as well is you need a way to make these different degrees of messaging available. So I have a variable in my environment for debug mode, and whether this is true or false, I will be able to hopefully control what I'm seeing in my application as these error messages are being propagated when it's running. So when debug mode is true, that's going to give me the maximum. And then when debug mode is false, it's going to give me a cleaner set of console messages that's made more for production. And maybe some of those could contain error messages, especially in situations where you might need to get those messages from the user's computer or have something that they can send you if something breaks. But it'll just be a cleaner version of that. The main thing here right now, though, is I want to just let it know, since this is meant to be a desktop application that runs on an isolated system, I need to have a good way to manage logs so that they are easy to find and inspect when needed and in a consistent location. Actually, no, let me back up. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. What I'm really trying to say here is that I need a custom logger. And I need a custom logger for the server firstly. When the server is made, I need there to be a custom logger, which will allow me to collect errors, error reports, error events in a log file. And when the application is running, I would like there to be a way to make the logs from the server as well as the front end result entries so that debugging is easier, especially when the app runs in production mode for the environment. I spelled all that wrong. I had so many typos. Just ignore that. I'm smart, I promise you. It's like I knocked over my green screen. Let's get that correct. Okay, so integrate logging crate like Fern to set up a multi-channel logger. I don't know what that means, but we'll find out as we go. I'm going to have it teach me things that I don't know. I'm going to use those as opportunities to learn, and I'm not just going to fly over new things. Okay, configure the logger to output to both this standard console and a persistent rotating log file. Okay, cool. Okay, this app's okay. And implement this service to both console log. Okay, so our logging strategy needs to tie in with debugging mode as well. It's gonna try this. I bet it's gonna try to do some work. Watch. Even though I told it to not. Nope. Cancel. Okay. So stop trying to execute. We are still landing. Okay. Next thing is that we need this logging part, our app to work with debug mode. So I'm not sure exactly how that should go. Can you recommend a strategy? And that was another thing I was thinking. I just forgot. Oh man, it just slipped my mind. What was it? Debug mode, app environment development. What was it? I'm just gonna say for now, debug mode is an variable. I'm gonna make this true by default. Okay. We have been streaming for 3 hours, well, 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 52 seconds. So we need a break here and probably another 15. Okay, I think that's good. So yes, update. The only thing that I'm thinking right now is that I've definitely expanded the sprint a little bit, but I think it's worth it because, like I said, this is really just to get the major touch points of the app, and logging is, I would say, quite a significant thing. Um, it's quite a significant thing, and trying to do that in a way that coordinates the REST backend with the JavaScript front end, that's also pretty significant as well. I don't know, does this debugger, I don't know if the debugger needs to work for Tauri per se, but let me just ask, does this debugger to work for the actual Tauri? Oh wait, does this logging system, that's what I meant. Okay. Okay, so sorry, I had to check my phone there for a second. I was looking at my calendar. Okay, so logging system we've designed will capture all logs from all three parts of the application. Okay. Okay, cool. Fern logger. I don't know anything about that, so I'm gonna need to learn about that a little bit. Any event log changes from this window. Okay, okay, cool. Fern. Okay, so Fern's a big thing. I guess I feel like we should maybe split the logs up into maybe a few types of files. What do you think? Also, what does rolling mean in the context of this logging system? Now, mind you, I don't know anything about the tooling around Tauri, so this might be redundant. Maybe Tauri already has this stuff figured out. In fact, that's going to be a thing I'm going to ask it before I finish this planning session. Now, for all you who came to see some coding, this is coding. This counts. In fact, you need to do this when you're working on things. This is a simplified AI-driven solo leveling version of how to do a design session, a sprint planning session. But I promise you that in an age where more is expected of the individual, especially with agentic coding tools and chatbots, this type of planning here is going to be the thing that makes you considerably a lot more attractive as a professional versus someone who just works haphazardly. In fact, I can tell you through a colleague, let's call it that, of mine, who works for a very well esteemed consulting firm that does a lot of international work. For large enterprises and businesses, her advice to me was when you work on things, work with a plan in mind, work in an organized fashion. Even when you're working on your own things, show that you can work aligned with actual goals that are thought out, well constructed, architected, and designed. And that is literally the behavior that people look for when they're figuring out if someone belongs on a team with them. So if you do that by yourself, you're going to be way better, and not just like attractive for jobs and stuff, but like your projects are going to come out more successful. And the time that we're putting into doing all of this is not a waste. Okay, so splitting log files. Let's see pros and cons. Here are the two main strategies. Capture all events. I think the thing here is that I eventually may need another reporting strategy, because if this was a SaaS app, we would have like Elasticsearch or something like that. I don't know exactly, but we'd have something like that, or even like the logs, the logger that's built into like GCP or AWS in the cloud. But we're actually responsible for handling this on the machine. We don't want to eat up a lot of memory, especially on the user's computer, but we want to retain enough information about these logs and bugs so that we can accurately see when something breaks and understand what was happening in the time space around it, in the runtime and stuff. Oh, you lose chronological story. Okay, what is rolling logs? Are automatic housekeeping mechanism to prevent log files from growing infinitely large. Okay, that's what I want. Okay. So I want to make sure the log file um, entries are structured in a way so that they are in the future able to be parsed as data reliably. Because what I might want to do, just as a fancy idea, is if there isn't a pre-built solution out there that is free that I can use to navigate my logs and search them, I might even just build like a simple tool, or I might even just try to run a local instance of some type of database or or something that lets me store my logs. But that's neither here nor there. But that is the idea behind having a structured, easily parsable log file. Okay, rolling mechanism automatically means it splits multiple files. Okay, 5 is fine. Controlled by the debug mode. True. Logs will be written to rolling JSON file. Only info logs will be written. um, I would like Okay. There might be a way in the future that I can make this system a little bit more flexible. Because what I'm thinking right now is like this debug mode control for all of this. So it says here log level will be debug. Logs will be written to both console and to a rolling JSON file. And then if it's false, log level will be info. Logs will be written. Okay. So what I really want is I really want for the ability if a user out there somewhere has a critical error, their app won't start or something weird happens, I do want to be able to potentially collect a record of what was happening that was causing the error. So I don't only want to have info. Um, I'm just not sure of exactly what the distinctions should be for like when and where to actually care. Because I don't want to include all. Well, I don't know. Yeah. So I think maybe just an alternate way to think about this is I think we can actually have all levels of logs written to the. I think we can actually have strategy where only important logs are written in debug mode when it's false, but also still include. I think the whole point of the debug mode is that while debug mode is running and it's in the true state, we could actually use it in a way that might not be so secure or safe. Like, for example, I'm running it locally and I'm having trouble with the consumption of a API token or something. I can run that locally and I can look at the logs to see if it's being passed through, right? But I don't necessarily want that to be logging out on the user's computer because what if their computer gets hacked or compromised, or what if they go look through there and they find something they're not supposed to see? So the debug mode really is just to protect the application from the user or from anyone who's like kind of looking and nosing around. But if something is broken, or even if there's like some key events within the stack that are within the runtime or whatever that are important, we still want to have those logged there. And since it's a rolling system, we don't have to worry about filling up memory. We would just know, like if an error happened recently, we will have enough of a log history to be able to hopefully find that error. So I don't know what that number looks like. Um, okay, but so what I really want to do here is I want to explain some intention and maybe have it rewrite this approach to the debug mode thing. So debug mode being should enable us to see logs that might generally not be wise or smart to log when in production, such as those that can reveal important information like the environment variables. When debug mode is false, and it should give the developer more insight into key time based events that occur as the server is running, which are contextually important for debugging or error tracking, but also in either mode, exceptions and critical errors that exceptions and Errors need to be logged regardless. So the idea here is that if I break the app while it's running, I can use the logs or rerun it in bug mode to get more verbose context into what happened. So I'm producing the ideas. I'm just having AI kind of fix it up and implant it in here where it belongs. This is one of those things where like AI is way super useful if you already have done whatever you're doing before. If you're doing it in a new area, it's less useful. But because I've worked on applications with lots of custom logging and debugging and stuff, I kind of have like a general sense of like what a good system for that would look like. And so I'm just using my intuition. It says I've reached my daily limit here. I got to switch over to my, well, let me, yeah. Oh wait, I can still go with Flash. Okay, cool. That's fine. Okay, retry. So I've reached my limit with Gemini Pro. Normally I don't, because like when you work in the daytime, you don't even really get to use Gemini Pro anyways, because they will like deprioritize you if you're using the your account instead of the API key. But it's fine because I can still use Flash, and Flash is good enough for me. Okay, so I think we. Wait, where is it? What is this? Let's just read. I think it did update this. It was kind of a weird way that did that, so that kind of like was weird to me. Wait, what is this? Gemini Code Assist standard? Is that another? Google has so many different. I promise you, there's like 5 different ways to pay for any Google AI thing out there. 10 different ways. I never heard of Gemini Assist standard. I just use the API token thing, which is the second option here, the Gemini API key. Okay, anyways, I might have to look into that. I don't know. The API key thing is cool. It's just I don't want to use it unless I really need to, because if it really came down to it, I could just use Cascade. But for this, I don't even really need Pro, so this is fine. So let's just read through this one more time. So debug is for deep analysis. Captures everything, including verbose, developer-centric information like environment variables, configuration details, fine-grained function traces. Logs are written to both console and a rolling JSON file. This is for production, or false is for production monitoring. Captures key, contextually important lifecycle, logical events. Will not log sensitive developer data. Okay, so we'll just say here, can you do 2 things? Make sure that Tauri doesn't already have a built-in solution or tools for this. I don't want to be redundant. Also, make sure this is best practices for logging in this type app. Just for sanity check. Just for sanity check. If you need a sanity check, we are basically cousins because I need one. Okay. Dang, 117 views. What? What? Dang. Thank y'all so much for coming by. It's good to see y'all. Well, I don't really see much of anything, but in my mind's eye, my third eye. Okay. It's doing its Google search. Okay, this is cool. Oops. We're going to be wrapping up here pretty soon. Okay, native capabilities. Oh, so it does have a built-in official solution for this exact logging scenario. To handle unified logging from both Rust backend and JavaScript front end. Okay, cool. So it's going to adjust my plan. Okay, cool. Okay, so it's going to adjust my plan. There's actually, instead of me having to build my own logger, which, oh my goodness, tell me about that. Building it cross TypeScript and Rust, that's a whole project itself. But thankfully, there's already a solution for that. Okay, cool. And then can you do some research and recommend the best approach for how to distinguish debug mode for an app like this? Is this the best approach? Okay. I always will have it just do some research to sanity check me at the end. The beautiful part about running with your own ideas is that it actually results in more thoughtful solutions. But human beings are as prone to inaccuracies as AI. So some would say we are more prone to it. Who knows? I don't know. But I just know that I always need to check my ideas because I don't necessarily know better than what AI would have told me. So whether I come up with something or AI comes up with something is getting double checked. That's one thing. One thing for certain, two things for sure. It's gonna get checked, and we're gonna do that always and forever. Okay. Hold on. Best practice for Tauri leverages the built-in capabilities of each part of the stack. When you run Tauri dev, Rust automatically compiles the debug assertions enabled. It's a powerful compile time flag that can be used to include exclude code. For instance, you can ensure this is a debug code like logging events or variables. People don't really think about logging. Logging is such an important part of programming. So debug mode will determine verbosity. And then there will be something like debug or dev for Rust or Solid. Okay. Okay. I like that. I don't 1,000% understand it, but I do like it. It's just water, guys. It's just water. Lukewarm, room temperature water. Filtered. Okay, cool. So I think with that, we have our sprint set up. I mean, there's likely some things that I don't have in here, which is fine. I'm not a stranger to that. I'm not intimidated. But we have all of the basic things that I need to have thought about enough to where I have a clear idea of what my outcome is. So my expected outcome is to have a basic Tauri application that displays some database text and has a functional CI/CD pipeline for dev and main. And that pipeline will, of course, include running the tests and linting and that kind of stuff, but also will result in having a released artifact that can be ran. And aside from that, centralized logging as well. And there will be tests for all this stuff. And I think we're in a good place here, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and do one last console log. Do one last commit. That's what I meant. And then I think I can hop off of here after 3.5 hours of streaming. Oh, it's one the password. Let me do this off screen. Oh, it didn't work? Oh, let's try it again. I hate when it does this while I'm streaming. Oh, shoot. I accidentally... Did that work? Because I didn't even finish... You know what? Never mind. Never mind. I don't know what just happened. It worked, but I didn't even type it. I don't know. Maybe that was like the big man, the big government, something watching me or something. I don't know. Anyways, that worked. I'm cool. I'm not going to question it. We're going to continue forth. I'm done, actually. I don't know about you. I'm tired. Okay, it is midnight officially. But we are done. We made it through. We made it through. I want to show you just one last thing, and then I'm going to get off of here. So, I'm going to load it up here on my computer. Got a surprise for you. Now, don't be too, don't expect too much. A simple surprise. Okay, so Primatif is growing. Ooh, let me clear my lungs to do this the right way. Let me do this the correct way. We're going to set this up and make ourselves look real good. So Primatif is growing. We have an official website now. It is extremely basic, but it is a full website. Actually, one of these days I would love to show you like the actual behind the scenes. I built this website using GCP and Firestore for the database, and just the whole like cloud infrastructure that I was able to set up for this application allows me a ton of flexibility as I will be building this out over the next several months. Right now, it's just a very simple app that tells you about the business, Primatif. So if you're kind of like trying to learn more about what I do and why this channel exists and our future direction, this is going to be the one-stop shop, the central hub for all that. And what you can expect in the short term is that this website is going to include very shortly here a way that we can connect. But for now, just remember primatif.com. That's primatif.com. And yeah, I'll have a lot more to share, but I just wanted to show you this website. It exists now. This was made with React. And yeah, I'm super proud of it. It took me forever to make this, not because of the actual UI, but because I just, for whatever reason, thought it would be a good idea to do this like super enterprise oriented cloud strategy. Well, really, it's just like cheaper because I have like custom deployments of everything, and I built this in a containerized serverless way as well. But let me stop rambling because I'm gonna do like a whole Minnesota goodbye. It'll be like another hour before I get off of here. But I just wanted to show you this before I get off, and also thank you for coming to the stream today. I will be back on the stream tomorrow. So don't forget to push that follow button, that like button, and also leave a comment. I would love to hear from you how you enjoyed this stream. This is probably one of the most attended streams I've ever done. So thank you all for that. I really, really appreciate that. But hearing from you in the comments is going to help me a lot so I can make better content and improve on whatever my weak points are. So anyways, for now, I want to thank you for coming by. I'm going to get off of here. I keep saying that, but I'm going to let you go. And I always leave with just a few words of wisdom. So let's do that before we check out. Okay, so listen, come on in here, real close. My name is Key Clark. I am the founder of Primatif, the founder, lead developer, architect, whatever you want to call it. And I just want to share just a quick word of wisdom. I want to share two things. The first thing is that right now, the world of software engineering is changing a lot. Even people who are, experts or more like further into their careers sometimes struggle to know exactly where this thing is going. So with that, I want to just encourage you to remember that you need to have ownership of your skill set. And no matter where the market goes, always take it upon yourself to be responsible for architecting and plotting your course in your career. And try to do that to the best of your ability, thinking about not just the moment, but trying to think a little bit about what's happening in the tech world right now. I'm not really one to give like strong advice, but one thing I will say that a lot more people can think about is the merits of having your own business structure. Even if you don't intend on being a consultant, even if you don't intend on running your own firm, it is really important to always enable yourself to make a living off of the thing that you like to do, that you spend so much time working really hard on. And even in the absence of as many jobs, or even in situations where there's a lot like a lot of layoffs like there is right now, if you have your own very simple business structure underneath you, you can still say yes to opportunities that may not necessarily be in the form of a 40-hour 9 to 5 job, just to put it plainly. And being able to do that can really help you get through some very difficult times, especially right now, because going and getting a 6-figure job at a large company isn't as easy as it was before, you know, especially with the advent of AI and all this stuff. I won't go into all that. We all read the same news. You can go on Twitter or Reddit and get that detail for yourself. But the point is that I want to encourage you to take ownership of your skill, to take ownership of your career, and just remember that if you can do something for a job and show up for someone else to build their dream, you can do that for yourself as well. Okay. And these skills, building software, which is really just about solving problems. It's about solving problems and making computers do what computers do. That skill is something that you worked for. And you can monetize that in so many different ways that don't have to be just, a full-time desk job. And surprisingly, if you do it well, you'll probably stand to make a lot more money. Now, the second thing I'm going to say before I get off of here related to that is it is scary. It is scary when you put yourself in a position to be responsible for your outcomes. One thing I will say is that many people who we look up to and admire, they got their start essentially faking it till they made it. because it's only a matter of time before you become really good at what you do, even if you're not great in the moment. So if you do find that courage to go and start to build for yourself, to build your own future, to build your own destiny, to take charge of where you're going with your career, just know that you don't have to have it all figured out. When you work in a methodical way, keep track, use the best tools available to you, and show up consistently, you're going to get somewhere, and it's going to be somewhere good. None of that is ever lost. So stick with it and stay with me. I like coding. I love coding. I love doing this, and we're going to make it through these really, really hard times together. But just know that you have a huge influence over the outcome, even in times like this. So do your best, show up, be consistent, and if you ever need a place to come where you can just watch someone else going through the labor of love with coding and stuff, just go ahead and subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to be doing that here 3 days a week moving forward. And I'd love to see you come back. So anyways, I'm signing off. This is Key. You're watching Primatif. Peace. Peace, balls, apple sauce. Peace, pals. I'll see you later. Thanks for coming by.